The sun was setting behind the tall buildings of the city when Armin's car drove through the golden gates of his family mansion. The gates were the same, heavy and grand, but his heart felt different. He had been away for many years, building his empire in another country, chasing wealth, chasing power, and chasing everything he thought would make life complete. But now, as the car rolled slowly down the long driveway lined with tall trees, he realized what he had missed. The soft glow of the lights, the sound of birds returning to their nests, the peaceful air of home, none of these things could be bought with money. Armin leaned back in his seat, staring at the large mansion that now stood before him. It was quiet, almost too quiet. He remembered his daughter, Aisha, as a little child who would run to him every evening, calling Baba with joy. But those memories were old. Aisha was grown now, and he had not seen her for years. The driver opened the door, and Armin stepped out, holding his briefcase in one hand. His steps were slow, heavy with both excitement and fear. What if Aisha did not welcome him? What if she blamed him for being away? The thought made his chest tight. Inside the mansion, the air smelled faintly of roses and polished wood. He walked through the hall, his footsteps echoing. The house seemed alive yet empty, like it had been waiting for him. He passed through the sitting room, then toward the back where he remembered the garden and pool were. He wanted to breathe fresh air before calling for anyone. As he approached the glass doors that opened to the backyard, he froze. His eyes widened, his breath caught. Through the glass, under the soft evening sky, he saw two figures in the pool. One was his daughter, Aisha, her hair wet, laughing with pure joy. The other was the maid, Miriam, a woman who had worked in this house for years. She was like family, always kind, always gentle, someone who had been there when Armin was away. But the sight still shocked him. His daughter, in the pool with the maid, playing and splashing water like they were sisters. Aisha's laughter rang out in the air, and Miriam's smile was warm, almost motherly. Armin pressed his hand against the glass door, his heart pounding. He had not heard his daughter laugh like that in years. He had imagined her sad, lonely, missing him. But here she was happy, alive, shining. For a moment, Armin did not know whether to smile or to feel hurt. Had she replaced him with Miriam? Did she no longer need her father? The questions burned in his mind. He opened the door slowly, and the sound of laughter grew louder. Aisha turned her head, her eyes meeting his. For a second, time froze. The smile on her face faded, her laughter cut short. She stared at him as if she was looking at a ghost. "Baba," she whispered, her voice trembling with both surprise and confusion. Miriam quickly stood still in the water, her expression worried. She lowered her gaze respectfully, as if she feared she had done something wrong. Armin stepped closer, his shoes touching the edge of the pool. He tried to speak, but words failed him. His throat was dry, his chest tight. He had dreamed of this reunion, but not like this. Not in silence, not with fear in his daughter's eyes. I am home," he finally said, his voice low, almost breaking. Aisha looked at him for a long moment. Her hands trembled as she held the edge of the pool. She wanted to run to him, to hug him, but something inside held her back. Years of distance had built a wall between them. Miriam quietly moved aside, giving space, but her heart ached too. She had raised Aisha in Armin's absence, cared for her like a second mother. She knew this moment was important, but she also feared it might hurt both father and daughter. Armin reached out his hand toward Aisha. "My daughter. I have missed you." Aisha's eyes filled with tears, but she did not move. Her heart was torn between love and pain. He had left her, but he was still her father. The pool water rippled softly, the air heavy with silence. For the first time in many years, father and daughter stood face to face, their hearts speaking louder than words. The evening sky darkened, and a single star appeared above the mansion. It was as if the universe was watching, waiting for what would come next. Armin finally sat down on the edge of the pool, his hands still stretched out. His eyes softened, his voice calmer. "Please, Aisha. I came back for you." Aisha's lips trembled. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust again. But the pain of the past held her heart tight. Miriam looked between them, silently praying they would find their way back to each other. She knew love was still there, hidden under years of distance. The night grew deeper, the pool lights glowing softly. The first chapter of their reunion had begun with shock, with silence, but also with a small spark of hope. The night air was cool, carrying the soft scent of jasmine from the garden. The pool lights shimmered, casting gentle ripples across the water where Aisha still stood, holding the edge tightly. Her eyes remained fixed on her father, who sat at the side of the pool, his hand stretched out toward her. For a long time, neither moved. The silence was heavy, filled with years of distance, years of missed birthdays, school events, and lonely nights. Armin's heart ached as he looked at his daughter. She was no longer the little girl he remembered. She had grown tall, graceful, with a face that carried both strength and pain. Finally, Aisha spoke, her voice low and trembling. "Why now, Baba?" The words cut through the silence like a blade. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her tone carried anger too. Armin lowered his hand slowly, resting it on his knee. He swallowed hard. "Because I realized I lost the most important thing in my life, you." Aisha's lips trembled, and she quickly looked away, afraid he would see her tears. She stepped out of the pool, wrapping a towel around herself. The distance between them remained, not in steps, but in hearts. Miriam, standing quietly nearby, finally spoke, her voice gentle yet steady. "Aisha, your father has returned. Maybe it is time to listen." Aisha turned to Miriam, her eyes softening for a moment. Miriam had been there for her every day, filling the space her father left behind. But now, that very man sat here, asking for forgiveness without words. Armin's gaze followed his daughter as she walked toward the garden bench, her wet hair clinging to her face. He wanted to run after her, to hold her like he used to, but fear held him back. Would she push him away? He stood slowly and walked after her, his footsteps echoing on the stone path. When he reached the bench, he stood a few feet away, hesitant. "Aisha," he said softly, "I know I have no right to ask, but will you sit with me?" She glanced at him, her eyes filled with a storm of emotions. She did not speak but nodded slightly, allowing him to sit beside her. They sat in silence, listening to the crickets and the faint splash of water from the pool fountain. The night seemed to stretch endlessly. "I used to wait for you," Aisha whispered suddenly, her voice breaking. "Every birthday, every holiday, I thought you would walk in. I even stayed up at night, looking out the window. But you never came." Armin closed his eyes. The guilt weighed heavy on his chest. He wanted to tell her about the endless meetings, the business struggles, the empire he had built. But none of that mattered now. None of it could heal the wound. "I am sorry," he said, his voice raw. "Every day I was away, I thought of you. But I thought, if I built a strong future, you would understand one day. I was wrong. I should have been here." Aisha's tears finally fell, rolling down her cheeks. She hugged her knees, turning her face away. "I didn't need your money, Baba. I needed you." The words pierced his soul. He reached out slowly, afraid she might pull back, but gently placed his hand on her shoulder. To his surprise, she did not move away. Miriam, who had been watching from a distance, felt her eyes water too. She knew both father and daughter were broken, but she also knew this was the beginning of healing. She silently returned inside the mansion, leaving them alone under the stars. Armin leaned closer, his voice trembling. "Will you give me a chance, Aisha? Just one chance to be your father again." Aisha lifted her head, her eyes meeting his. They were filled with pain but also with a faint spark of hope. She did not answer immediately. She studied his face, the lines of age, the sorrow in his eyes, the sincerity that she had longed for. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know if I can forgive you so easily. But I don't want to hate you either." Armin's heart eased for the first time in years. It was not full forgiveness, but it was a door opening. He nodded slowly. "That is enough for me. I will wait. I will prove myself, not with money, but with time, with being here." Aisha wiped her tears with the edge of her towel. She wanted to believe him, but fear of disappointment still lingered. She had trusted once before and had been left behind. The wind blew softly, rustling the trees. For a while, they simply sat there, side by side, father and daughter, sharing a silence that felt less heavy now. Aisha spoke again, her tone softer. "Did you ever think of me when you were away?" Armin smiled sadly, his eyes glistening. "Every single day. I kept a picture of you on my desk. I carried it everywhere. But I realize now, a picture cannot replace the real you." For the first time that night, Aisha's lips curved into a small, fragile smile. It was brief, but it was enough to light a spark in Armin's heart. The sound of Miriam's footsteps returning broke the moment gently. She carried a tray with warm tea, placing it on the small table near the bench. "The night is cold," she said softly. "You both need warmth." Armin looked at Miriam with gratitude. She had done so much, more than he ever could during his absence. As they sipped tea under the stars, Aisha felt the wall around her heart begin to crack. She did not trust him completely, not yet, but deep inside, a voice whispered maybe, just maybe, he truly had come back for her. And that whisper was enough to let hope breathe again. The next morning, sunlight filled the mansion, shining through tall windows and landing on the polished floors. The air felt different, lighter, as if the house itself knew its master had returned. But inside Aisha's heart, the storm was not yet calm. She sat at the dining table, staring at her untouched breakfast. The sound of footsteps approached, and she looked up to see her father, Armin, walking in. He wore a simple shirt instead of his usual business suits. It felt strange to see him this way, almost like he was trying to be ordinary. "Good morning, Aisha," Armin said gently, taking a seat across from her. She nodded slightly but did not speak. She was not ready to act as if everything was normal. Years of emptiness could not vanish in one night. Miriam entered the room, carrying a fresh jug of juice. She placed it on the table and gave Aisha a warm smile. "Eat, child. You need strength." Then she looked at Armin. "And you too, sir. Strength is needed for rebuilding hearts." Armin nodded with gratitude, understanding the hidden meaning in Miriam's words. They began eating in silence, the clinking of spoons filling the room. Armin noticed how Aisha avoided his eyes, her mind far away. He wanted to speak, but he feared saying the wrong thing. Finally, Aisha placed her spoon down. "Baba," she said quietly, "if you are really here to stay, prove it." Armin looked at her, surprised. "How do you want me to prove it, my daughter?" Aisha's gaze was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "You always cared about your business more than me. So this time, I want you to care about something I care about." Armin leaned forward, listening carefully. "Tell me." She took a deep breath. "There is a school charity event tomorrow. I am helping organize it. Parents are supposed to come and support. Will you?" The question carried more weight than it seemed. She was not just asking him to attend. She was testing whether he would choose her over his busy world. Armin smiled softly, without hesitation. Yes, Aisha. I will be there. But Aisha did not smile. She had heard promises before. She simply nodded and stood up, excusing herself from the table. When she left, Miriam looked at Armin with kind but serious eyes. She is testing you, sir. Do not fail her this time. Armin's heart tightened. I will not. That afternoon, Armin tried to spend time with Aisha. He went to the garden where she often sat with her books. She looked up when he arrived, her expression guarded. May I sit? He asked. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. He sat beside her, glancing at the book in her hand. What are you reading? Stories, she said shortly. Will you read one to me? He asked gently. Aisha raised her eyebrows. You want me to read to you? Yes, he said with a smile. I want to hear your voice. For a moment, she studied him, trying to see if he was mocking her. But his eyes were sincere. Slowly, she opened the book and began to read aloud. Her voice was clear, soft, carrying the emotions of the story. Armin listened with full attention, his heart swelling with pride. He realized how much he had missed her growth, her talents, her simple presence. When she finished a chapter, she glanced at him, expecting boredom. But he clapped softly, his smile genuine. You read beautifully. I am proud of you. Aisha's cheeks warmed, and she quickly looked away. She did not want him to see the small happiness in her eyes. That evening, Miriam joined them in the sitting room. She carried tea and biscuits, setting them on the table. Do you know, Miriam said with a playful smile, when Aisha was little, she once stood on a chair and pretended to give a speech to all the dolls in her room. Aisha gasped softly. Miriam. Armin laughed for the first time in years, his voice filled with joy. Really? You were giving speeches even then? Aisha covered her face with her hands, embarrassed. But inside, she felt warmth. For the first time since his return, the room felt alive with laughter, like a family again. Miriam watched them quietly, her heart full. She had prayed for this moment, and though the road was long, she believed healing had begun. The next day came quickly. Aisha stood near the school hall, dressed neatly, her heart pounding. Parents filled the place, talking and smiling. She looked around nervously. Would her father come? Or would this be another broken promise? Minutes passed, and her chest tightened. Then, suddenly, she saw him. Armin walked in, wearing a simple suit, his eyes searching until they found hers. He smiled and waved. Aisha's heart skipped. He had come. When he reached her, she whispered, You are here. Of course, he said softly. I promised. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not only of pain. They carried a hint of relief. As the event began, Aisha stood on stage to give a short speech. She glanced at the crowd and saw her father watching proudly. His eyes never left her, and his smile was steady. For the first time in years, Aisha felt a sense of belonging. She was no longer just a lonely daughter of a distant man. She was someone's pride. And in that moment, she realized maybe he truly was trying to change. The school event ended with applause, laughter, and cheerful faces. Parents congratulated their children, and teachers thanked everyone for their support. Aisha stood proudly with her friends, feeling lighter than she had in years. Every few minutes, her eyes found her father in the crowd. He was smiling, clapping, and even speaking politely with the teachers. For the first time, she felt proud to say, That is my father. When they returned home, Aisha surprised even herself by walking beside Armin instead of keeping distance. Miriam, who followed quietly, noticed the change. A small smile appeared on her face. It was the first step of many. That evening, Armin sat in his study, looking at old photographs on the desk. One picture showed Aisha as a small child on a swing, laughing. Another was of him with his late wife, holding baby Aisha in their arms. His chest grew heavy with memories. He had been away too long. As he traced his finger over the photo, his phone buzzed. An old business partner's name flashed on the screen. Armin hesitated, then answered. "Armin," the voice said quickly, "we need you back. There is a big deal. If you don't come to the city tomorrow, we may lose everything." Armin froze. His mind raced. For years, he had lived for such calls, rushing to meetings, chasing success. But now his daughter had given him a chance. Could he risk breaking it? He ended the call without giving a reply. His hand trembled as he set the phone down. The next morning, Aisha found him at the breakfast table. She seemed brighter, more open. "Baba," she said with a small smile, "thank you for yesterday. It meant a lot." Armin's heart warmed. He wanted to tell her about the call, about the temptation of leaving, but he stayed silent. He did not want to ruin her trust so soon. Later in the day, however, Aisha overheard two workers in the garden talking. "They say Sir might leave again," one whispered. "A call came from the city last night. Important deal." Aisha's heart sank. She stood frozen behind the wall, listening. Her chest tightened, her smile fading. Was it true? Was he going to leave her again, after all his promises? She went straight to Miriam, her voice shaking. "Miriam, is it true? Is Baba leaving?" Miriam looked at her gently, her eyes thoughtful. "Child, sometimes the past pulls strongly. But listen, not all whispers are truth. If you want to know, ask him yourself." But Aisha shook her head. Fear gripped her heart. She could not face him directly. She did not want to hear another promise that might break. That night, Armin entered the living room and found Aisha sitting silently with her arms crossed. She did not greet him. "Is something wrong, my daughter?" he asked softly. She looked at him sharply. "Are you leaving again?" The question hit him like a storm. He sat down slowly. "No, I am not leaving." "But I heard," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I heard you got a call. That someone asked you to go back." Armin sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "Yes, they called. They wanted me to return. But I said no. I chose you." Her eyes searched his face, trying to read the truth. "You didn't tell me," she said, her tone filled with hurt. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you would think I was still the same man who always left." Aisha's eyes filled with tears. "You should have told me, Baba. I don't want lies. I just want honesty." Armin leaned forward, his voice steady. "Then I promise you this: I will never hide the truth from you again. If I struggle, if I am tempted, I will tell you. Because you deserve honesty, not silence." For a long moment, she looked at him. Then, slowly, she nodded. It was not full trust, but it was a step closer. Later, when Aisha went to bed, Armin stood in the garden with Miriam. The night breeze carried the sound of crickets. "She deserves better than me," he said quietly. "I failed her so many times." Miriam placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "She does not need a perfect father. She only needs a present one. You are here now, stay here. That is enough." Armin looked at the stars, his heart heavy yet hopeful. "I will not let her down again." The next few days passed quietly. Armin spent time with Aisha, joining her in small things, helping water the garden, listening to her music, even sitting with her while she did homework. At first, Aisha found it strange. But slowly, she began to smile more, laugh more, and talk to him about her day. The walls around her heart began to fall, brick by brick. Yet in the background, whispers of the business world kept reaching Armin. Old partners called, pleading for him to return. Each time, he said no. But each time, the struggle grew heavier. And Aisha, though happy, still carried fear deep inside. A small voice in her heart asked, would he truly stay, or would the shadows of his past take him away again? The question remained, hanging like a cloud over the bright days. The days that followed were filled with quiet attempts at healing. Armin spent every morning with Aisha, joining her for breakfast, walking with her in the garden, and listening to her stories. For the first time in years, the mansion felt like a home again. Laughter returned to its walls, though softly, like a fragile bird learning to fly. But outside the mansion, the world of business kept calling. Letters arrived, phone calls buzzed, and messages piled up. Old partners begged Armin to return, warning him that the empire he had built was starting to crack without him. At first, he ignored it. He pushed the phone aside, closed the laptop, and reminded himself of his promise. But the weight grew heavier each day. He had spent his whole life running after success. It was not easy to step away completely. One evening, as the golden light of sunset spread across the garden, Aisha found her father sitting alone in the study. His head rested in his hands, and his phone lay on the table, screen glowing with unanswered calls. "Baba," she asked softly, stepping inside. He looked up quickly, trying to hide his tired expression. "Yes, my daughter. Are they still calling you?" Armin hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. They want me back." Her heart sank. "And, will you go?" He stood, walking to the window. The city lights glimmered in the distance, like a reminder of the life he had left behind. "I promised you I would stay. But sometimes, promises are hard to keep." The words struck her like a cold wind. Fear returned to her chest, stronger than before. She clenched her hands. "So it is true. You will leave me again?" Armin turned quickly, his voice firm. "No, I did not say that. I am only saying that the choice is not easy. But you," he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You are my choice, Aisha. I want you to believe that." But Aisha shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "You always say the right words, Baba. But words are easy. Staying is hard." Before he could reply, she ran out of the room, leaving him standing in silence. Miriam found Aisha later in her bedroom, sitting by the window with tears on her cheeks. She walked in quietly, sitting beside her. "Child," Miriam said gently, "what is troubling you?" Aisha turned to her, her voice breaking. "I cannot trust him, Miriam. Every time I think he will stay, something pulls him away. I am afraid that if I open my heart again, he will break it once more." Miriam took her hand. "Do you know why trust is hard? Because it is given piece by piece. He is trying, Aisha. He may stumble, but he has not left. That alone means something." Aisha wiped her tears, listening. She wanted to believe Miriam's words, but the fear still lived inside her. That same night, Armin sat with Miriam in the kitchen. He looked older, his face lined with worry. "I do not know what to do," he admitted. "My business is falling apart. But if I leave, I will lose my daughter forever." Miriam looked at him calmly. "You cannot fix everything at once. You must choose where your heart belongs. Wealth can return, but a daughter's heart once broken again may never heal." Armin lowered his eyes. Her words were true, but the choice still tore him apart. The next day brought an unexpected test. A car arrived at the mansion, carrying two men in sharp suits. They introduced themselves as Armin's partners and requested a private meeting. Aisha watched from the balcony as her father walked into the study with them. Her chest tightened. She knew this moment would decide everything. Hours passed. She waited, restless, her heart racing. When the men finally left, their faces were stern, their voices raised in anger. Armin came out, his shoulders heavy, his face pale. He had refused them. When he saw Aisha standing there, he forced a tired smile. They wanted me to return immediately. I said no. Her eyes widened. You said no. Yes, he said firmly. I will not leave you, Aisha. Let the business fall if it must. I cannot lose you again. Her heart swelled, and tears filled her eyes, not of pain this time, but of relief. For the first time, she felt that his actions matched his words. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. Do you mean it, Baba? Truly? Armin placed his hand gently on her cheek. Truly, my daughter. You are my world now. That night, Aisha sat beside him in the garden. She leaned her head lightly on his shoulder, something she had not done since childhood. He closed his eyes, savoring the moment, his heart full. Miriam watched from the distance, her lips curved into a smile. She had seen the storm between them, but now, for the first time, she saw a calm beginning to bloom. Still, deep inside, both father and daughter knew the road ahead would not be without trials. Shadows of the past always linger, waiting to test the light of the present. But for now, they had chosen each other. And that choice was the beginning of something new, something stronger than wealth, stronger than distance, stronger than fear. The mansion slowly began to feel alive again. For years, its halls had been silent, filled only with the soft footsteps of Miriam and the echo of loneliness. Now, laughter sometimes echoed through the rooms, and the sound of Aisha's voice carried warmth into spaces that had long been empty. Armin made an effort to be present. He joined Aisha in small daily routines. In the mornings, they ate breakfast together by the window, sunlight painting the table in golden light. In the afternoons, they walked through the garden, sometimes in silence, sometimes in quiet conversation. At night, they sat in the living room, where Aisha read aloud from her books while Armin listened. For Aisha, these moments felt strange at first, like a dream too fragile to be true. But as the days passed, she began to relax. Her father was not just making promises, he was keeping them. Miriam, watching from the sidelines, felt joy blooming in her heart. She had prayed for years for this reunion, and now she saw a father and daughter slowly learning each other again. But peace, no matter how sweet, is always tested. One afternoon, while Aisha was at school, a letter arrived for Armin. It was from the bank. He opened it quietly in his study, his eyes narrowing as he read. His business accounts were slipping fast. Without his leadership, the empire he had built was crumbling. Armin leaned back in his chair, his chest heavy. He had chosen his daughter over business, but now he wondered if he would lose everything he had created. Would he one day have nothing to leave for her? When Aisha returned home, she found him sitting silently in the study, the letter on the desk. She stepped closer. Baba, what is it? He quickly folded the letter and forced a smile. Nothing important, my daughter. Just old matters. But Aisha's eyes narrowed. You promised no more secrets. Armin sighed, defeated. He handed her the letter. She read it slowly, her hands trembling. The business is failing. Yes, he admitted softly. But I will not leave you. Let it fail if it must. Aisha's heart ached. But Baba, that business is your life's work. How can you let it go? Because, he said firmly, looking into her eyes, you are my life's work now. Her throat tightened, tears welling in her eyes. She wanted to believe, but she also feared what losing everything would mean. That evening, Miriam joined them for tea in the garden. Aisha told her about the letter, her voice heavy with worry. Miriam listened, nodding. Then she spoke gently. "Child, do not think only of what may be lost. Think of what is already gained. A father who chooses you over wealth that is worth more than gold. But what if he regrets it later?" Aisha whispered. Armin reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I will not regret it. I regret only the years I lost with you." Aisha's lips trembled, and she nodded slowly. His words eased her heart, but doubt still lingered like shadows at the edge of light. The next day, Aisha invited her father to her school's art exhibition. She had painted something special and wanted him to see it. When Armin entered the exhibition hall, his eyes widened. On the wall hung Aisha's painting, a picture of a girl standing at the edge of a long road, her hand reaching toward the silhouette of a man in the distance. Above them, the sky was divided, one half dark with storms, the other glowing with sunrise. Armin's chest tightened as he realized what it meant. It was their story, her waiting, him absent, and now his return. He stood before the painting for a long time, his eyes wet. Aisha came to stand beside him, her voice soft. "This is how I felt, Baba. Alone in the storm. But when you came back, the sun returned." Armin turned to her, his voice breaking. "I am so sorry, my daughter. I cannot change the past, but I will fight for the future." She smiled faintly, and for the first time, she reached out and took his hand willingly. But just as light filled the moment, another shadow appeared. When they returned home that evening, a black car was waiting outside the mansion. A man stepped out, one of Armin's old rivals. His face was stern, his voice sharp. "Armin," he said coldly, "your empire is falling. And when it collapses, it will not just be your name ruined, it will affect everyone, even your daughter." Aisha stiffened, her hand tightening in her father's. Armin's jaw tightened. "Leave my family out of this." The man smirked. "Family or not, when the storm comes, no one escapes." He turned and walked away, leaving tension hanging in the air. Aisha looked up at her father, fear in her eyes. "Baba, is it true? Will this storm reach us too?" Armin wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "I will protect you. No matter what comes." But deep inside, he knew the storm was real. The business world he had abandoned was not finished with him. And soon, the test of his love would grow even harder. The days after the rival's visit were heavy with silence. Armin tried to smile for Aisha, but the shadow of coming trouble pressed on his heart. He had left his empire behind, yet now that empire was knocking at his door, demanding a price. One evening, Miriam found him standing alone on the balcony. "You cannot fight this storm with silence," she said gently. "If you run from it, it will swallow you. But if you face it with truth, maybe you will find peace." Armin nodded slowly. He knew she was right. The next morning, he called Aisha and Miriam into the study. His voice was steady but heavy. "I must face my old world. But I will not leave you behind this time. We face it together." Aisha's eyes widened. "Baba, does this mean you're going back?" "No," he said firmly. "I am not going back to live in that world. But I will not let it destroy us. I will fight for what is left, and then I will close that chapter forever." For the first time, Aisha did not argue. She only placed her small hand on his and whispered, "Then I will stand with you." Miriam's heart warmed. At last, the bond was true. News spread quickly. Rumors of Armin's weakness brought old enemies circling like vultures. Some wanted to take his companies, others wanted to see his name broken. The rival who had come before returned with papers and threats. But this time, Armin was not alone. At a gathering of shareholders, Armin stood tall. Many faces glared at him, waiting for him to stumble. He began with simple words. I built this empire with my hands, but I also lost years of life chasing its weight. I will not lose more. If you want power, take it. But you will not touch my family. Murmurs spread through the room. Some laughed, some frowned. His rival rose with sharp words, then you are finished. But before Armin could answer, a soft voice spoke from the back. It was Aisha. She had insisted on coming. She stepped forward with calm eyes. He may be finished with you, but he is not finished with us. He is my father. That is worth more than all your money. The room fell silent. The words of a child carried more weight than business talk. Some lowered their heads in shame, others shifted uncomfortably. Armin's rival clenched his jaw. This is not a place for children. Armin stepped forward, his voice like steel. She is the reason I will never bow to men like you again. The meeting ended with anger and broken ties. Armin signed away much of his empire, leaving behind the chains that had bound him for years. His rival thought he had won, but Armin walked away lighter, freer. When they returned home, the air was fresh, like rain after a storm. Aisha looked at him carefully. Baba, are we poor now? Armin laughed softly, pulling her close. No, my daughter. We still have enough. But even if one day we had nothing, we would still have each other. That is wealth no one can steal. Her smile was bright, her trust complete at last. Weeks passed. The mansion no longer felt like a lonely palace. It became a home. Aisha filled it with her drawings and songs. Armin filled it with his presence. Miriam moved quietly as always, but with joy in her steps. One evening, as the sun set, the three of them sat by the pool, the same place where Armin had first found the shocking sight of his daughter with the maid. But now it was no longer shocking. It was natural, warm, and full of life. Aisha leaned against him and whispered, I used to think I had no father. Now I know I have the best one. Armin's heart swelled. He kissed the top of her head. And I have the best daughter. Miriam smiled softly at them, her prayers finally answered. The storm had come, but it had passed. What remained was not wealth, not empire, but something far stronger: love, trust, and the bond of family. For Armin, this was the richest return of all.